My mom didn't realize when she butt dialed me. I heard her, my sister, and my uncle laughing, calling me a useless burden while bragging about how I always pay their rent. "He's too desperate to say no," she snorted. I said nothing until they asked for this month's check. I, 29M, was sitting in my apartment, reviewing some client proposals when my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Mom. I almost let it go to voicemail since I was deep in work, but something made me pick up. What I heard next would change everything between us forever. The line was muffled at first, like the phone was in her pocket or purse. Then I heard her voice clearly, along with my sister and uncle laughing in the background. They were having what sounded like a family gathering that I apparently wasn't invited to. Mom was in the middle of telling some story about how she had asked me to cover their rent again this month. She described how I had immediately agreed without even asking questions, just like always. My sister chimed in, saying something about how predictable I was, always jumping to help whenever they called. But it was what came next that made my blood run cold. Mom laughed and called me a useless burden who is too desperate for their approval to ever say no. She bragged about how easy it was to get money from me, describing how I always acted grateful just to be included in family events. My uncle added that I was like a walking ATM with abandonment issues. My sister agreed, mentioning how I had paid for their vacation last year and never even got a proper thank you. She said they all knew I was lonely and would do anything to feel like part of the family. The three of them laughed about how I always offered to pay for dinner when we went out, trying so hard to prove my worth. I sat there frozen, listening to them dissect my character like I was some pathetic case study. Mom mentioned how my father had always said I was too soft, and apparently they all agreed. She talked about how I had been sending them money for almost 3 years now, ever since I got my promotion, and how they had grown comfortable expecting it. The worst part was hearing them discuss my personal life. My sister brought up how I rarely dated anyone seriously, suggesting it was because I poured all my emotional energy into trying to win their love through financial support. Uncle agreed, saying I was basically paying them to tolerate my presence at family functions. They started planning what they would ask me to pay for next. Mom mentioned wanting to renovate her kitchen and suggested they could guilt me into covering it by claiming it was a family investment. My sister said she needed help with her car payments, and Uncle laughed about how I would probably offer to buy him a new truck if he played up some sob story about his old one breaking down. The conversation went on for nearly 20 minutes. I heard them strategizing about the best ways to approach me for money, discussing my emotional triggers like they were manipulating a child. Mom even imitated the eager way I responded when they called, making her voice higher and more desperate. When the call finally ended, I sat in complete silence for almost an hour. Everything I thought I knew about our family dynamic had been shattered. Every family dinner, every holiday gathering, every moment I thought we were bonding, it had all been performance art designed to keep their personal cash machine running. I looked back at my bank statements and calculated exactly how much I had given them over the years. Between rent payments, emergency funds, vacation contributions, and various other requests, it totaled nearly $40,000. Money I had worked overtime to earn, money I had saved by living in a modest apartment and driving an old car. The next few days were strange. They called and texted like normal, asking about my week and making small talk. Mom even sent me a funny meme about family bonds. I responded normally, not letting on that anything had changed. I needed time to think and plan. 2 weeks later, Mom called asking for the monthly rent payment. She used her usual approach, mentioning how grateful she was to have such a responsible son and how proud Dad would have been of the man I had become. She talked about how tight money was this month and how much my help meant to the family. I told her I would think about it and get back to her. This was the first time I had ever not immediately agreed to send money. She seemed surprised but didn't push, probably assuming I was having temporary cash flow issues. That weekend was my cousin's birthday party. The whole family would be there, including Mom, my sister, and Uncle. I decided this would be the perfect opportunity to address what I had overheard. I spent days planning exactly what I would say and do. I arrived at the party with a wrapped gift and my usual smile. Everyone greeted me warmly, and Mom made a point of telling other relatives how wonderful I was for always being there for family. My sister hugged me and mentioned how much she appreciated everything I did for them. During dinner, Uncle made a toast about family loyalty and looking out for each other. The irony was almost too much to handle, but I maintained my composure. I waited until most of the other relatives had left, leaving just the core group that had been present during that phone call. Mom brought up the rent payment again, this time in front of everyone. She explained to the remaining relatives how I always helped with family expenses, painting it as a wonderful example of sibling and generational support. Several people praised me for being such a devoted son and nephew. I stood up and asked if I could say something to the group. Everyone smiled expectantly, probably thinking I was going to make some heartfelt speech about family values. Instead, I pulled out my phone and played the recording I had made of their conversation from 2 weeks ago. The room went completely silent as their voices filled the space, discussing me like a business transaction. I watched their faces change from confusion to recognition to absolute horror. Other relatives who were still there looked shocked and uncomfortable. When the recording ended, I calmly explained that I had received their accidental call and heard every word. I told them I had always wondered why family gatherings felt performative, and now I understood why. I was never actually family to them. I was a resource to be managed and exploited. Mom tried to interrupt, claiming they were just joking around and didn't mean any of it. My sister attempted to explain that they were stressed about money and said things they didn't really believe. Uncle remained silent, probably calculating how much this would cost them financially. I let them finish their explanations, then told them I had made some decisions. First, there would be no more rent payments or financial support of any kind. Second, I would not be attending future family events unless they were specifically for cousins or other relatives who had always treated me with genuine respect. Third, I expected them to pay back the money they had taken under false pretenses. The room erupted. Mom started crying, claiming I was being cruel and destroying the family over a misunderstanding. My sister accused me of recording them illegally and violating their privacy. Uncle finally spoke up, suggesting that I was overreacting to private venting that everyone does about their relatives. I remained calm and told them they had 3 months to arrange repayment of the money they owed me. I had calculated interest and created a payment plan that would allow them to settle the debt over 2 years. If they refused, I would pursue legal options and make sure everyone in our extended family knew exactly how they had been treating me. Several relatives who had witnessed this confrontation approached me privately before leaving. Most were supportive and admitted they had always thought something seemed off about the family dynamic. A few mentioned they had suspected Mom and my sister were taking advantage of my generosity, but hadn't known how to address it. Update 1. 3 weeks have passed since the birthday party confrontation, and the fallout has been exactly what I expected. Mom has called me every few days, alternating between tearful apologies and angry accusations. She keeps insisting that families help each other, and I am being selfish by cutting off financial support. My sister has taken a different approach, trying to convince other relatives that I am having some kind of mental breakdown. She has been spreading the story that I secretly recorded a private conversation and am now blackmailing family members. She conveniently leaves out what was actually said in that conversation. Uncle has been completely silent. I suspect he is the most worried about potential legal consequences, since he was actively participating in discussions about manipulating me for money. His wife reached out to ask if we could talk, but I declined. I have no interest in more family mediation sessions designed to pressure me back into my old role. The most interesting development has been reactions from extended family. Several cousins have reached out to share their own experiences with Mom and my sister asking for money over the years. Apparently, I was not their only target, just their most reliable one. One cousin mentioned lending my sister money for a supposed emergency that turned out to be a vacation fund. I have maintained my boundaries completely. When Mom called asking for help with an unexpected medical bill, I referred her to the payment plan I had created for debt repayment. When my sister texted asking if I wanted to grab lunch to talk things through, I reminded her that our relationship was on hold until they addressed their financial obligations. The hardest part has been dealing with my own emotions. I keep second-guessing myself, wondering if I am being too harsh or if there was some way to handle this differently. But then I remember the casual cruelty in their voices as they discussed my loneliness and desperation, and my resolve strengthens. I have started seeing a therapist to work through the family dynamics I never fully understood. She has helped me recognize patterns of emotional manipulation that go back to childhood. Apparently, my eagerness to please and fear of abandonment made me an ideal target for financial exploitation. Update 2. 2 months after the confrontation, I received an unexpected call from a lawyer representing Mom and my sister. They claimed I had illegally recorded a private conversation and were demanding I stop sharing the recording with family members. They also wanted me to cease all demands for debt repayment. I immediately contacted my own attorney, who reviewed the situation and determined that since the call came to my phone number, recording it was completely legal in our state. More importantly, they had essentially confessed to fraud by admitting they had been deceiving me about their financial needs while requesting money. My lawyer sent a formal response outlining their legal exposure and restating my repayment demands. We also included documentation of all financial transfers over the past 3 years, which painted a clear picture of systematic exploitation. The lawyer representing them quickly backed down and advised his clients to negotiate a settlement. Meanwhile, the family drama has expanded beyond our immediate circle. My cousin's wife mentioned the situation to her mother, who apparently knows Mom through community organizations. Word has been spreading through their social circles about the recorded conversation and financial manipulation. Mom called me in tears, claiming that people at church were treating her differently and she was humiliated by the whole situation. She begged me to make a public statement that the recording was taken out of context and we had reconciled. I told her the solution was simple: pay back the money they stole and publicly apologize for their behavior. My sister has been more defiant, insisting that family members should support each other without keeping score of money. She argues that all the vacations and dinners I paid for were gifts, not loans, and I cannot demand repayment. My lawyer disagrees, especially since we have recorded evidence of their deceptive intent. The most satisfying development has been reconnecting with relatives who were genuinely concerned about me. Several cousins have invited me to family events that do not include Mom, my sister, and uncle. I have started building relationships with family members who actually value my company rather than my bank account. I also made a decision about my living situation. I had been staying in a modest apartment to save money for family emergencies and requests. Now I am shopping for a nicer place and planning some long overdue personal purchases. It feels strange to prioritize my own comfort after years of managing everyone else's financial needs. Update 3. For months after everything started, I have reached a final resolution with Mom, my sister, and uncle. Faced with potential legal action and continued social consequences, they agreed to a settlement that requires them to repay 60% of the money they received from me, structured as monthly payments over 18 months. More importantly, they provided written apologies acknowledging their manipulation and deception. These were not the grudging non-apologies I expected, but detailed admissions of how they had exploited my desire for family connection. My lawyer insisted on these statements to prevent future claims that I had misunderstood their intentions. The most significant change has been in my relationship with the rest of our family. Several relatives have privately thanked me for exposing behavior they had suspected but never confronted. My cousin mentioned that Mom had asked her for money multiple times using similar emotional manipulation tactics. I have maintained complete no contact with Mom, my sister, and uncle throughout this process. All communication goes through lawyers, and I have made it clear that any attempts at direct contact will be considered harassment. This has been difficult emotionally, but necessary to prevent them from trying to manipulate me back into old patterns. The therapy sessions have been incredibly helpful in understanding how this situation developed over years. My therapist helped me recognize that my father's death when I was in college had made me desperate to maintain connections with remaining family members. Mom and my sister had exploited this vulnerability systematically. I have started dating someone I met through work, and it has been refreshing to build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. She was shocked when I told her about the family situation, saying she could not imagine treating a relative that way. Her perspective has helped me understand how abnormal my family dynamic had become. The best part of this whole experience has been discovering my worth outside of what I could provide financially. Cousins invite me to events because they enjoy my company. Friends seek my advice on professional matters because they respect my judgment. I have value beyond my bank account, something I had forgotten after years of family programming. Looking back, I realized that accidentally recorded phone call was the best thing that could have happened to me. It showed me the truth about relationships I had idealized and freed me from obligations that were destroying my financial future and self-respect. Sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most important changes. The monthly payments from my settlement have been arriving on schedule, and I use that money for things that genuinely benefit my life. I have taken a vacation I actually enjoyed, bought furniture that makes my apartment comfortable, and started investing in my retirement instead of subsidizing other people's lifestyles. Most importantly, I have learned to recognize manipulation tactics that once worked on me effortlessly. When people try to guilt me into financial assistance or use emotional pressure to get what they want, I can see through their strategies immediately. This has improved not just my family relationships, but my professional and romantic life as well. The family members who genuinely cared about me have remained in my life, while those who saw me as a resource have faded away. This natural selection process has left me with a smaller but much healthier support network. Quality relationships, it turns out, are far more valuable than quantity.